Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV and part 2 of the Weekend Warriors, that being the Spec Racer Fords. My name is Ron Mons. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall over, old friend Samuli Kumo. Today we're at a track that doesn't even exist anymore, that being the Phoenix Road Course from iRacing's 2008 legacy scan of the facility. Now, as I just said, this track doesn't even exist anymore. It hasn't since 2011. But despite that, this track probably gets just as much use in real life nowadays as it does in the sim. Not a whole lot of people use this track, which I think is going to create a very strange race. So Charles, to pass this off to you, what are you expecting out of this race we have today?
I mean, just from watching practice, this may be a little bit of a chaotic race. Obviously, we've got the NASCAR circuit we can work with, and it's going to give you about half the track on the oval, so that's going to make the draft very, very critical here. The infield is fast. It's faster than the road course we did at New Hampshire. Probably not as fast as the road course at Homestead, which we've seen both here and on the for esports on Tuesday nights. But so it's kind of in the middle there, but it's a fairly open layout. So track's pretty wide even in the infield section. But there's going to be some touch points that we're going to talk about prior to this race starting. Some very critical things that we're going to have to be looking at during the course of this race.
There is a lot of stuff that we have to keep in mind. We mentioned during last week's broadcast at the wonderful street circuit of Belle Isle, it was kind of a half joke, kind of half serious at every single corner on that racetrack was something for these drivers to try and keep in mind. This track is absolutely no different. 13 corners of punishment for these drivers, 13 opportunities to make some sort of mistake, and maybe 13 opportunities to get a move on your competitors done as well. We're currently in this qualifying session, and you can see in the back of shot all these drivers chucking it around this very oddball circuit. It looks very strange as well, just looking at a track map of it, and it's an oddball. It was one that I was looking forward to, it must be said, all throughout this season, all the way back when the season started many moons ago. I was like, Phoenix Road Course, that is going to be ridiculous. I've only done one ever broadcast here at this track, and that was in MX-5 Cup cars and Toyota GR86s, which race quite differently compared to these Spec Racer 4s, which are absolute draft monsters. And now, Charles, we were talking before the start of this race about this track, and I mentioned how from the apex of turn number 11, the hairpin towards the end of this layout, all the way up until turn number 1. These drivers are flat at, so I think the slipstream properties of these Spec Racer Fords are probably going to be cranked up to 11 here this afternoon.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I said, you've got about half of this 1 mile oval that you're going to be running around in these cars, and as we've seen with some of the other Roval courses that we've ran, just gives you a good chance to get a really good slipstream. You'll pick up probably 0.4 of a second on your lap time because of that. But then the going into turn 1 is where the fun starts. It's going to be it's going to be chaos from basically the entry of turn 1 all the way to that hairpin that exits the infield.
I think before we really get things rolling with this qualifying session that we're in right now, we're going to take a look at the championship standings as things stand entering this round. And in the S1 category, Jason Green, who put on a fantastic drive in the Formula Fords earlier on this afternoon, is leading in that class, 586 points on the board ahead of Joao Tabino there, the Brazilian in P number 2. Evandro Dantas a little bit farther back there of Jason Green, however, still pretty close in that S1 category due to Castro and Simon Mayer running at the top 5 in that class. Very close as well in the S2 category. We'll take a look at that as well. Paul Jackson is leading that, 346 points on the board ahead of Philip Berry there in P number 2. Only 15 points separating the two drivers at the very front end of Spec 2. And then Pedro Carvalho a little bit farther back, however, he is still close and within striking distance entering the final trifecta of races from the season. Wilson Brozarasco in 4th and Russell Teckler in 5th, but the closest class, without a question or shadow of a doubt, is your favorite, Charles, the Masters category.
Yeah, 10 points separating the two Aussies, Cathcart and Gradwell. Cathcart with 370 points. Then we've got another battle for P3. So the final step on the podium is Burkett, and 6 points behind him is Kurt Nunez with Jorg Monty distant 5th. It's still potential to make up some spots, and just got to have 3 good races in a row. Hope for a little bad luck on the other drivers, but obviously when we talk about, we don't mention the word luck when we talk about Jorg Monty because he hasn't had any good luck this season. So yeah, it's still a nice battle up there. I think maybe a gap between 2nd and 3rd. I'm not sure that's going to be able to get caught, but these guys are running really, really well. And you just look down the list. I mean, Fritcher's been a class winner this season, so they're still really, really good drivers up and down the Masters class.
Hey, you mentioned Frischer there. He actually won last time at the last race that we had of this series at Belle Isle. Ended up taking the checkered flag to top of the Masters. P6 overall. Very nice for the driver of the 943 car. So we're in this qualifying session. We're following Marco Pinero heading into one of the most challenging sections that we've visited so far this season. You careen off the oval, head into turn number 1 and 2 there, which is running on the old pit lane of the scan of the track. It is, I think I compared it as to running on a track that feels like it was paved over a sinking swamp. So that is a very tough section to get right. I had some experience running this combination in officials earlier on this week. I say earlier on this week, it was just 2 races yesterday, but in my time running the Spec Racer Fords at this track, I learned quite a lot. Firstly, the tires will cook here with these cars. We saw in the graphic at the very beginning of this broadcast, 110 degrees is the track temperature right now. We actually have the other weather, 113 degrees, sorry. In the other practice I was doing earlier on this week, my rear right tire was screaming in pain after about 8 laps. I think the highest temperature I got on it was 244 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a teeny tiny bit toasty. So really, I think the tires will probably play a huge role in the race we have coming up. So strategy, usually a big role here in these SRF races. Again, like the slipstream is going to be cranked up to 11 this afternoon.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 113 degrees, probably 46-ish, I think, somewhere around in there, as far as if that's in Celsius. So yeah, the infield of this track is just so interesting. So we'll talk about it a little bit as we're riding on board with Antonio Reese here. You come off the oval into turn 1. You've got a pit wall, or the wall separating the track and the pits, but it comes to a point right at the apex of the corner. So you got to first navigate that, make sure you come in as close as you can, but not hit it. And then once you get past the wall, then you're going to have to worry about pit traffic. The pit exit basically is the racing line going through out of turn 1 and into turn 2. So you're going to have to worry about that. There's a kink we call turn 5. Once again, we use the Road America terminology. You don't pass in the kink because there's another wall there. So you got to be pretty steady, and it's a pretty fine line. As we're looking here, as we're going into turn 1, you'll see that kind of wall just kind of jutting out there. Ooh. And that was a big contact there. Looked like the 422 just got loose going down off the banking, which is another thing when you're running robles. You have to worry about that. Is that transition is very difficult sometimes to get the car slowed down and down off the banking into that flat section. So that probably won't be the last time we'll see contact there. So yeah, it's just the infield is wide, so there's opportunities for side-by-side racing, but there's a couple of spots that you got to be pretty precise, otherwise you're going to end up destroying the front of your car and maybe other cars as it kicks you back into the middle of the track.
I think what we may do here in this qualifying session, as it's approaching its dying stages, less than a minute left to go here, and Marco Panero is only 1,000th of a second off of our pole man as it stands at the moment, that being Joao Tabino at a 1 minute 03.574. Tabino is in the pit, so he's not going to be able to challenge and try and get any sort of lap on the board. Marco Panero, meanwhile, rounding his way around turn number 12 and 13 on this layout. He has a draft of Nazelli, I believe, right in front of him. I believe that's Nazelli right in front of him. Yes, it is. So he's actually setting a qualifying time. He usually decides not to qualify. However, Nazelli bucking that trend, so giving Panero a nice tow, but it didn't help Panero as he's still 1,000th of a second behind Tabino, who's now exited back onto the circuit. That is going to sting. Only 1,000th of a second separating those two drivers. Very, very close right now. I'm looking through the top 10, separated by less than a half a second. Christian Kabanka in P10 right now is at only 0.476 of a second off of our provisional pole man, Joao Tabino, with a checkered flag out in this qualifying session. Still a lot of moving and shaking that we could see from these drivers. It's hard to string together a clean lap at this circuit. The fastest lap that I did in my experience running the officials, and this really shouldn't be anything to brag about, was a 105.7. I wish it was a 103.7. It was a 105.7, which would put me pretty much stone dead last in the field. There's a very good reason why I'm behind a microphone instead of behind the wheel. But it's just, we're going to mention this word a lot throughout this broadcast, Charles, and that is challenge. Challenging pit exit, challenging pit entry as well. Yep. You don't want to try and pick up the penalties. You don't want to try and cook the tires off of your race car. This race is going to be an odd one. It's going to be tough for a lot of these drivers, and we're going to see the creme de la creme rise in this race as well.
Yeah, this is kind of the standard for the SRFs. You've got the top 21 cars within a second of pole time. So just shows you how talented all these drivers are and how they're running really strong laps. Yeah, one millisecond between the top two. It's just going to be, I think we were in practice. I think at one point we had the top 5 within about 1/10 of a second of each other. So it's going to be a very challenging race. Obviously, a track that we don't run a lot is going to make it a big challenge as well. And yeah, you just kind of wonder how the tires are going to hold up. Obviously, hot track with an old set of concrete will make it very slippery, and we'll see what happens, because I think it's race time.
Yes, it is. We're going to get the starting grid for you in just a couple of moments' time. A packed grid of Spec Racer Forza. It's going to be Joao Tabino leading them to green. Marco Panero starting alongside, only 1,000th of a second separating those two drivers. If that's an indication of what kind of finish we're going to have in this race, you should be on the edge of your seats over the next 40 minutes. Evandro Dantes there in P number 3, someone I had the pleasure of racing with in those officials. He blew my doors off in that qualifying session that we were in for that race. Zudu Castro is going to be starting this race in P number 4. Then we have Rosende there in 5th. Alice Pleva, who won earlier on in the season, is in P number 6. Jason Green in 7th. Jeff Frister in 8th. Scott Russell in 9th. Christian Gabanka is going to round out your top 10. Then looking outside of it, we have Andre Favini there in P number 11. Philip Berry in 12th, the top of the drivers in the S2 class. Then Antonio Reese in 13th. Simon Mayer in 14th. Ben Jacobs in P15, and Nazelli, who we usually see starting towards the back, is going to start in P16. That's Tarantino. Jurcevic, Carvalho there in P at number 19, and Alan McCain is going to round out your top 20.
Yeah, starting in P21, Megan Overstreet making her triumphant return to the series this weekend. Kurt Nunez is in 22nd, Chris Montgomery 23rd, Adam Bradshaw is in 24th. And we have Paolo Brim in 25th, Josh Wilkie, our buddy, in 26th. Tom Gradwell, Jim Brewster, all Masters row, 27th and 28th. Jason Perry, Josh Justice, all spec 1 row, and as 29th and 30th. Then we have Brad Cathcart, 31st, Jesus Rodriguez in 32nd, Paul Jackson, 33rd, Ignacio Terusio in 34th, Greg Holland in 35th, Kenneth Batley in 36th. And Jason Grider, 37th, Wayne Buttermore, 38th, not setting a time, Jorg Monty in 39th, Stevie Ray, league organizer, in 40th, Gianni Longan and Russ Telker round out the 42-car field.
42 cars around this track. Not a whole lot of real estate if you're one of these drivers. This track is only 1.5 miles long, so we're going to see it's going to be chaos all throughout this race. I feel bad for our producer, Samuli. He's going to have to be like a chameleon looking at like 14,000 different things at once throughout this race. This is going to be a fantastic and really enjoyable race, and to put on this fantastic racing week in and week out, you have to have some equally fantastic sponsors, and for the second half of this season, we have had one in the form of Personal Wealth Solutions. Just like in racing, financial planning and investments require a team behind and experience as well. Personal Wealth Solutions creates custom investment and financial planning strategies for select individuals and businesses as well. With over 25 years of experience, their goal is not to have you feel like a number, but make you feel like they're number one. If you'd like to learn more about financial planning run by racers serving racers, head on over to www.personalwealthsolutions.com. We'd like to thank Personal Wealth Solutions for being the proud sponsor here of the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors, and the sponsor of the Spec Racer Fords for the Ray Esports Racing League every single Tuesday here on Apex Racing TV. The next race for that calendar, the third to last round of that season at Laguna Seca, is going to be very dramatic. This upcoming Tuesday gives you more of a reason to subscribe to Apex Racing TV here on YouTube. You never want to miss a thing. And if you don't want to miss a thing, hit that notification bell as well, so you're notified of every single live stream and YouTube video that's posted here on this channel. But now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of this race. The drivers are back onto the oval. They're going to head their way through turn number 12 and 13 on this Roval layout. Incredibly packed up, it must be said. Joao Tabino, it's like he's running at a snail's pace heading through this oval section to round off this lap. Turn number 1 and 2, I saw it in the official races I did. I'm sure we'll see it here in the Weekend Warriors. It's going to be hectic, it's going to be dramatic, and it's going to be great to watch as well. The Porsche pace car has gone down into pit lane. Now the field is in the hands of Joao Tabino, who's gone. The green flag is out and the drivers are on their way. That's a very early jump, it must be said, from Joao Tabino. Meanwhile, Marco Pinero is fighting for his life to hold on to that P2 spot. They're descending their way into turn number 1 and 2 right now. Curved braking zone, trying to go through the gears as quickly as you can to try not to lose any places. But the drivers up towards the top 10 are getting through clean. Jeff Frister is the top of the Masters drivers right now, running in P number 7. We'll see how they fare heading through the kink of turn number 7 before they have to get slowed down into the hairpin of turn number 7. Then I'll have to negotiate the rest of the corners on this lap. There's some contact, near contact farther in the back. Some drivers going side by side already. That's Simon Mayer locked steady in a nice fight to try and hold on to that final top 15 position. But surprisingly slow, these drivers getting through that first few corners here on this very challenging and troubling track. Nice and clean, Charles.
Yeah, it was great first lap. Looks like everybody got through cleanly. Now we're going to see the draft and it go into action here as we see Overstreet moving out to the inside. So this is going to be the critical part where people are going to start leapfrogging each other. But yeah, for the most part, I think we didn't have any incidents on the first lap. So well done by everybody.
I do see a little bit of damage on the front end of Megan Overstreet's car. She's down the inside of Pedro Carvalho. Meanwhile, one of the cars in front of them definitely hit the inside barrier. I saw a big puff of smoke. Maybe it was Tarantino. Megan Overstreet going around in turn number 2. That's big crash there. A few more cars involved. Megan Overstreet stopped in the middle there. Try not to hit her. Try not to hit her. That's going to be the memo of all these drivers. Alan McCain was the one that got clipped by Megan Overstreet spinning spec racer forward. And that shows you how disastrous a moment is heading through turn 1 and 2. I suffered it in the official races I did earlier on this weekend, and we just saw there as well. Wayne Buttermore running slow as well. I wonder if he picked up damage from the spinning incident there heading through turn number 1 and 2. I think we're going to have to take a look at a replay to see what in the world happened there. It's not the most off-the-wall incident, though. Turn number 2, so difficult. There's so many different lines you can run at that section of the course. It was only inevitable that someone was going to get a little bit wrong.
Yeah, this is Overstreet coming down the inside and making a little bit of contact right there. Yep, just kind of tightens up there. And luckily, McCain was the only one. He just really had nowhere to go. Only one to make contact. All the rest of the drivers did a fantastic job of recognizing the car and avoiding it. So obviously, Overstreet's back to the back of the field. McCain is as well. He's going to have to try and ride that out until it's time for the pit window to be opened, as we see Tarantino running along with Carvalho, as we see Holland coming back onto the track, rejoining. I got a couple corner there that a couple of cars are just getting way too deep on the brakes and end up in the off-track area.
Ooh, you can see the front end of Brad Cathcart's car. He has been used up as that's a spin for Wayne Buttermore heading his way around turn number 7. Brad Cathcart just made a teeny tiny bit of contact as he went into turn number 5. That's a 260 that's just blown his doors off heading into the hairpin of turn number 11. Now Megan Overstreet looking to find a way to get through. Usually front end damage like that, I mean, that's pretty substantial on the front end of Brad Cathcart's car, but at a track like this where the final third of this circuit is spent flat out, any sort of front end damage like that is a death sentence. I saw that in the official races I was doing on earlier this week. Had a photo finish with someone because I had a front clip of the spec racer Ford that was entirely used up, but these cars at the front of the field are pretty much entirely pristine outside of a few bug smears here and there due to Castro running in the final podium position and Alice Pleva looking to try and break his way back into the top 5 right now, currently running P6 in the number 46 car. But so far the drivers at the far north end of the field negotiating the first 4 or 5 laps of this race very, very clean.
Yeah, so far so good for the guys up front. And yeah, it's just one of those things that is they'll get in line and the draft will keep them pretty much tight together as they get going here. When you have incidents like you have with Overstreet, we'll kind of build out kind of a natural gap in the field. You know, once it gets over a second, it's really hard to make that time up unless you're working with other cars and they're willing to stay, you know, nose to tail and just run a line. But, you know, you get, you know, the competitive juices get flowing. It's hard to do that. Sometimes you just want to make moves. You've got so much overspeed when you're behind somebody that it's natural just to say, okay, I'm just going to move up in front of you. And then you realize, oh, it's just because of the draft, and now they're going to pass me again the next time we get back to the straightaway.
Ooh, Antonio Reese is feeling really racy right now. He's just outside of the top 10 right now and looking maybe trying to go for a move heading into the final real corner of the circuit of turn number 11. Not close enough to get the move done, but I think before we start off this lap, I feel like we should ride on board with someone because the outboard camera angles don't really do a lot of the corners on this racetrack justice. It's really tough negotiating even this section, the oval turns of turn 12 and 13 on this road course layout. You get really flirtatious with that outside concrete barrier. No safer barrier there. If you hit that, you're going to be in for a world of trouble. Then heading through turn number 1, getting very close to that inside barrier. Then this is turn number 2, and ooh, that was a big slide. Who was that? That was a 22 car. That was mega sideways heading through turns 1 and 2. Thankfully, they kept it clean without spinning like a top heading through that section. But you can see turn number 5, the king. Charles, you mentioned it earlier on in this broadcast. You do not want to pass there. It seems like a fairly nondescript corner on the track map, but with that barrier, I think it's probably about 6 inches away from the racing line. You do not want to even attempt to go side by side through that section. Otherwise, you're going to be in for a world of trouble. Turn number 11 is a very good braking zone as well. You'll probably see some good passes there. You won't see them in turn number 5. There are, I think this track, oh my
no.
God, what in the hell has happened here? That's Ben Jacobs involved, and he's hitting another car again. That was a 22 who we saw sideways earlier on. There's been some major drama here with Scott Russell. That was big heading through turn number 11. We're going to have to take a look at a replay to see what in the world happened here, Charles.
Yeah, it's just Russell was coming down through the infield here in a little fast section of S's as we get down into turn 11 to that final brake point, and just too hard on the brakes and loop the rear of the car around. And when you've got 2 or 3 cars just stuck behind you, it's hard to and then probably not the best rejoin and not the best angle there to rejoin back in the racing line, and causing some more carnage there.
So we've already seen some drivers get binned by the bullet here at Phoenix. Not ideal way to start this 40-minute race that we have. Adam Bradshaw that we're following in P23 right now. A whole lot of damage on the front end of that spec racer. Ford gets his metaphorical doors blown off by Jim Brewster heading into turn number 11 here. It's a good overtaking opportunity. I nearly said easy. No overtaking opportunity around this track is easy. It's wide, but it's still hard to get a move done clean. That's Alice Pleva getting a move done to move into that top 5 along with Resende. So those two were following along heading through that 1 and 2 section. I believe that was Evandro Dantas that they overtook and displaced him back into P number 6. We're seeing some more drivers fall out as well. I think that may have been Simon Mayer that just dropped down in the back of shot. I saw him tumbling down the running order. My eyes were deceiving me yet again. Yeah, I think he's are we already seeing some pit stop? I think it must have been to fix some sort of damage. He may have been collected in incident early, because it's way too early to start regularly scheduled pit stops.
Yeah, it definitely looks like it was a short pit stop, only 9 seconds stopped. So I don't know. It may be one of these. This may be one of those races where you can go for 30, 32 minutes. Oh, as we see contact there with Fritcher and the 32 car of Dantas, who's just falling down the order. I'm not sure what's going on with Evandro there, but he's dropped several positions in the last lap.
I'm curious if his tires overheated. I mentioned it earlier on in this broadcast, and I'll mention it again. Tire temperatures are huge. Nazelli coming in for a very early stop here, so this is not even 10 minutes on the board. That's going to be a tight squeeze for him to get to the checkered flag on gas. However, Nazelli, he's gone for some off-the-wall strategies in the past, maybe going for one here once again, and we're going to take a look. You can see the weather forecast, still 107 degrees for the track temperature. That is hot enough whereby just walking around this version of Phoenix here in iRacing would probably hurt even if you had shoes on. So this is not ideal. These tires, I think if we listen very, very closely, we can hear the distinct help me of the tires on these spec racing Ford race cars.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 107 is, like I said, it's an old track surface. So, these cars are probably really skatey, and it is probably increasing the wear. I don't think anybody will be trying a tire change, because I just don't think it's one of those that we normally do. I think for the most part, they're resigned to the fact that if I go in and change tires, I don't think I'll make up the time that I would lose by making the tire change. So, maybe somebody strikes out and maybe does 2 tires, maybe the right sides. But for the most part, I think it's going to be a fuel only on the pit stop. And then I think, obviously, once again, Mayer with that early stop, that's kind of right on the edge of what I would say is pit being open. So we'll see if that's the right call. We see Stevie Ray coming down now, who's normally our first pitter, that says, okay, this is when the pit cycle has started. So that may be a lap too early for Mayer.
And Greg Holland going off as well. We've seen some drivers dip some wheels into the grass. We've seen some drivers go off already. We haven't really mentioned this so far in this broadcast. The gravel as well. I was talking to our producer, Samuli, before we started up this broadcast. The gravel around this track, it's like you're slamming straight into a concrete barrier. Even with the old gravel physics, where the gravel wouldn't slow you down too much, it is a big hit whenever you go into the gravel trap. And we saw nearly a collision with Jackson Resende, currently running in P number 4, and Stevie Ray, who is coming out of the pits. Again, that is very marginal, and Andre Favini has spun in turn number 2, ran a little bit wide. I think that's fairly textbook stuff. I'm trying to look to see if there's any sort of damage on that race car, which would lead me to believe that there's a bump that he was given, a boot scoon boogie heading through turn number 2. No, that car looks fairly clean. I think that was just a simple self-spin heading through turn number 2, which again, it's hard to pinpoint what's the hardest corner on this racetrack, but turn number 2 has to be a mention. That is probably every single thing that can make a corner challenging on a racetrack, turn number 2 has on this track.
Yep, as we saw, we got 477 with no front end. We've got I saw the other number, just couldn't quite catch it as we're looking here at Ben Jacobs coming down, and we get a replay coming up. Yep, there we go. So we got Ben Jacobs, and we've got a spinner up in front. That was that Favini that just checked everybody up, maybe? Is that who that was?
No,
that was Tarusio. That was a spinner that, yeah, it's obviously that little section of track is causing some issues today.
That section, it's one of the things that a whole lot of race cars in iRacing do not like is very quick changes in weight balance. You hit that inside curb of turn number 6, then you got to get load up into turn number 7, dropping down to usually second gear. These drivers are probably winging it through third because they're much better race car drivers than I am, but that's still so it's easy to make a mistake through that section as Favini is going off yet again. That's in that section I just mentioned, turn 6 and 7, and then that long, it feels like a never-ending right-hander. It's the only real torture that the left-hand side tires get on these Spec Racer Ford race cars at a track like this. But Andre Favini struggling quite a lot, nearly running into the backup. I think that's Bradwell right in front of him, I believe. If not, that's another car who I cannot see. But either way, Favini struggling right now. I wonder, are overheating tires causing these drivers to have more mistakes now than they did at the very beginning of the race?
I mean, that's very possible. It could be just because this is kind of an unusual track for us, and that might be a reason. Is they're just like Favini maybe was just pushing too hard into the corners, and that's probably just the rear end not being able to support it, carrying that much speed.
I think if these drivers take some tires during their pit stops later on, which maybe it's just me preferring being a little bit of a tire princess when it comes to stuff like that. I would certainly want tires if I came in, but these drivers probably want to have that track advantage. They want to have track position when it comes time for their pit stops. But at least the right side tires, they're going to be in a whole load of trouble. That is one of the main reasons why these right side tires are screaming in pain. Ooh, and Pleva looking for a move down the inside. Gets it done on Resende heading through turn number 1. Very nicely played from the driver from Czechia. Very, very well done, and nearly making contact there. Resende nearly gave him the chrome horn. Actually, it'd probably be more of an aluminum horn heading through turn number 2. But regardless, very, very close to contact with Resende. It's a hard-fought fight between those drivers, and it's allowed the podium runners to start to pull away here.
Yeah, for sure. That was a brave move by Pleva. Obviously, you could just see from the camera angle, not a lot of room there to make that dive to the inside. It would not surprise me if we see somebody try that move and it just kind of gets cut off. It only takes a little juke, half a car length, car width to the inside by the car in front, and you overcorrect, and the next thing you know, you're bouncing yourself off that inside wall. So yeah, this group has started battling, and it's allowed the top 3 to be an open arrow and Castro to just jump out to about a 3.5 second gap or so.
I think the front left tire is the only point where I think a front left tire shot would be fantastic is heading through turn number 1. That has to be a fantastic camera angle. We'll probably get a good inside view of the concrete barrier heading through that corner, but just very, very bold stuff from a lot of these drivers going for audacious moves, which is surprising because we're only 15 minutes into this 40-minute race here. Lots of drivers racing hard, racing aggressive, and already dealing with lap traffic as well. I'm curious how much the field has spread out, because currently the top 25 with Megan Overstreet running in 25th are separated by about 41.5 seconds, and you can see, thank you very much, Simile, for the quick work on the graphic. There is no stone unturned on this track. There's maybe 1 or 2 corners at any given time that do not have a race car charging through them. So that'll be a big factor when it comes time for the pit stops, as drivers try and go for that undercut strategy. They're going to have to keep their eyes out to see where they exit out on circuit. Speaking of exiting, that's Paulo Brema. That is not a good view if you want from a driver exiting pit lane, seeing a bunch of people shave the right side of his race car as he exited the pits.
Yeah, that's going to be tricky as we get to the heavy pit stops. Is cars coming out there? You can see they're tied to that inside wall. They have to stay around the inside of that corner until they get to the blue cone that says that's the end of pit exit. Then they can move out. So the cars that are coming off turn 1 are going to be very aware of that. And we did just a little look prior to the race, and you can only really see the roll bar of that car over the pit wall. So you don't get a lot of look, a lot of time to react. And one thing I have to mention is the official races we do here are only 20 minutes, so there's no pit stop, necessary. So, that's why we're not really sure about the tire usage as we get that shot from it's so close. So that's
about what I was expecting.
Yeah, that's just kind of drove through the wall there with the camera. So we don't know, what kind of tire life you're going to get for a 40-minute race. And even the guys that, run the officials during the week don't really know. They got a pretty good gauge of, how much you can do for the first 20 minutes, because that's how long the official race is. But then it's the decision to whether or not to take tires. Once again, I don't think anybody will. I think the guys up front, as long as these guys are, not fighting every corner, they give a chance to get their tires cooled off a little bit and maybe not wear them as much as they would necessarily would if they're battling side by side for the entire event.
Well, that was pretty interesting. I saw Rosende break away from the back of Pleva's car coming out of turn number 11. I wonder if Rosende may be suffering from some slight overheating issues. He's been behind Pleva for a decent number of laps now with the very hot temperatures that we have here at Legacy Phoenix. I wonder if even engine temperatures are going to play a huge role in how things shake out here. Rosende with a nice drift and a big curb whack on the inside of turn number 2. When we've been following Rosende, it looks like he's driving this Spec Racer Ford pretty much like a shifter car. Nothing screams it more. Heading through turn number 6, he clouders that inside curb of turn number 6, and then it runs a little bit wide, it must be said, heading through turn number 7. He's actually, I think he may be risking a slowdown as well. That is very borderline and very hard stuff from Rosende heading through turn number 6. Interesting lines being run here, Charles.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's cutting it as close as he thinks he can, and we did see that little bit of a lockup on the inside tire that caused that little bit of a gap up. But obviously that'll be cleaned off here in short order as they get on this straightaway, and he can get that draft, and that should get him back three or so tenths back up to the car in front as we see another move to that inside, just so tight, going down to the inside of turn 1 there by Castro, take over the second spot over Panero.
Even the driver's up towards the front, and that's a big moment for Rosende. He was sideways heading through that section the past few laps, and now it's come to bite him. We're going to take a look at a replay to see what exactly happened to him heading through, about to careen his way back onto the pit lane section, hit that transition from the banking onto the flat section of the circuit, and never really recovered from that. That's a huge whack in these Spec Racer Ford cars. The suspension really isn't designed to handle a bump like that, and I think that's a main reason why Rosende went off there.
Yeah, we see our old buddy Josh Wilkie taking the alternate line there, like he was in a battle there with couldn't see who that was. Let's see if I can pick up the name. Might have been Rodriguez. I think he was in a battle in that group and got a little bit offline. Couldn't tell if he locked up or not, but he's back on the track, rejoined nicely, and he's now behind Nunez and Perry.
Wasn't going to mention him because he was having a fantastic run of pace. However, I think maybe there might have been a small little mistake that, or he just ran wide and had a moment. That was very far off the circuit, it must be said, so we may have to take a look at a replay to see what happened to our buddy Josh Wilkie. Jesus Rodriguez locked steady in a nice fight between himself and Tarantino heading through turn number 13 now. We haven't seen a driver clobber that outside wall of turn 13, which is quite surprising to me, knowing my luck. I probably just jinxed it. Jesus Rodriguez gets that move done heading into the second corner. Jim Brewster, I don't think we've talked about it all throughout this broadcast, outside of an occasional moment here and there. He's putting together a pretty good race, currently P4 in that Masters category, right behind Tarantino. He may be able to break into the podium soon. He's put together a quiet yet good showing here as Brewster.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we talk about Tim or talk about Jim, we have to say hello to Tam, his sister, who is, I think, supposedly coming home, I think, for a visit here in the not too distant future. So we may have an additional voice in the commentary booth before it's all said and done. But yeah, Jim having a good race. He's battling. He's just right behind Tarantino by a second, so he can make that gap up and he can try and get on the podium here for this race.
That would be a very good result. We'll just have to wait and see how things shake out in the second half of this race, which we are in now. Less than 18 minutes ago here, this race has flown by pretty quick, and we are going to see that flood down pit lane begin here in the next few laps. I think the drivers up towards the front of the field may try and stretch their legs out a little bit more. Meanwhile, drivers that have spent a lot of this race in the draft are going to benefit from those better fuel mileage numbers. Jason Perry in P17, I think he spent a decent chunk of this race in the draft. He's been in no man's land throughout none of it. He's been rock steady. Oh, and our producer Josh Wilkie going for a spin heading through turn number 6. The poor guy. Oh man, I will say he has a cold right now, I believe. So well, it could be a cold, could be bird flu or whatever it is. Not ideal for Josh heading through turn number 6. My apologies. Again, a really hard corner to get right, especially at speed, and our old buddy Josh Wilkie proving that right there.
Yeah, I think he got a curb, so yeah, it's just one of those that sometimes you can run the curbs in these cars, and then other curbs just doesn't seem to, as we see Castro there taking, just doesn't seem to want to work well. So yeah, he's dropping down a little bit, but we'll be pulling for him and see if he can make up some of those spots. Still in a good position. He's got to make up a little bit of time. Castro now has taken up to the lead. He's over Tabino and Pinero. Pleva's done a good job. He's actually kind of pulled away from Fritcher now. He's kind of on an island of his own here. He's got about a 2-second gap behind him, and he's doing his best to close up as we talk about Jim, and the next thing you know, Jim's around sideways.
Oh man, it's a bad commentator's jinx from the both of us. We'll try not to mention him throughout the rest of this broadcast outside of this spin heading through this section of turn 6 and 7. I think my replay may be a little bit glitched. Oh, it was contact there. Yeah. So the chrome boring getting broken out again.
Yep, for sure. Yep, just a little bit of contact going in that corner. Some alternate lines being taken. Saw some cars off on the side as well. As Fritz now he's relinquished the lead of the Masters class to get his pit stop done, as we're over 24 minutes in the race already. Where's the time gone?
Yeah, this race has absolutely flown by, and the pit stops are beginning. Jeff Frichter, who's led dominantly in that Masters category, has come into the pits. He's now running all the way down in P20. So Brewster is now running in P4 in the Masters class. However, once all these pit stops start, he may drop back just a teeny tiny bit. So Frichter, it's been a dominant drive from him. He's been running solidly inside the top 10 all of this race for the past 25 minutes. So him now in traffic, this may be a little bit foreign for him, seeing a whole load of race cars around him. However, he sees a bigger picture. He knows what he has to do. If he can hold on and just maintain a decent amount of pace, he'll take a pretty dominant win in that Masters category. But as we did with Brewster a few moments ago, me saying that he could take a dominant win, knowing my luck, he's going to get abducted by a UFO here soon.
Well, let's hope not. Let's hope we have no alien abductions, even though this is probably the track that's closest to Area 51 of any track we're going to visit during the seasons. We see Fritcher coming back into the pits. Oh, wow.
I wonder, did he pick up a penalty? I'm trying to look to see. Did he pick up some sort of penalty? Yes, he did. I see a black flag next to his name. So it's Jeff Frister. I wonder, was it a speeding penalty or was it an unsafe pit exit penalty? Because this pit exit, we mentioned it earlier, the pit exit is very strange, whereby you have to run all the way to the end of the boxes. You can see for sure he hits the end of the pit speed limit right there, and you have to stay within that yellow line until you hit that blue line there. Then you can merge back onto the circuits. I wonder if we'd possibly be able to find a replay of Frister's pit exit there to see how exactly he picked up that penalty. Either way, that is costly for the driver who I thought was on track for a dominant Masters win. Right as I say that, he picks up a penalty. Classic commentator's jinx.
Pretty much. So obviously it wasn't pit speeding in, or we'd have served it when he pitted. And so when he came out, I think that's a time penalty. So I don't think a drop through. So this may just be from incident points as we're getting the replay here. So we'll see as he comes out. He's coming out and he's got to stay tight. He's got to stay on the inside line there. And nope, there he did not. There you go. Yep, too far out. So he picked up speed too quick, and that will be the drive through that he had to serve. And so that's going to take him out of contention for the class win, I think.
Well, it's still not over yet. We'll have to see how things shake up when it comes to Antonio Reyes, who, as things stand currently, is running a P number 8 as Christian Kabanka has now come in and is dropping down the running order. Antonio Reyes racing quite hard right now, heading into turn number 1, trying to negotiate. I think that's our buddy Josh Wilkie right in front of him. So Antonio Reyes, as things stand currently, it's himself and Brewster is running in P15, a little bit farther behind. So Antonio Reyes, if that penalty affected Frister as much as it has, that is going to be a huge stroke of luck for Antonio Reyes in the number 914 car. This has been a very, it hasn't been as incident-packed as I was expecting to. However, this is still shaking out to be a very interesting race. How are things going to work out with Duda Castro, Tabino, and Panero? How are things going to shake out with Antonio Reyes as long as he keeps his car clean? Nearly giving our buddy Josh a nice little checkup heading into turn number 11. But we haven't even touched on the S2 fight, which is currently being led by Jurcevic. Marco Panero, the driver running in the podium position throughout this entire race, has now come in. So as we approach the 30-minute mark here, in less than 2 minutes time, we could be seeing the front drivers finally come into the pits as we see hard racing there. Heading into turn number 1 and 2, and that's, oh my God, our producer Josh Wilkie probably just had a heart attack there looking at all that. That was dramatic for the both of them, it must be said.
Yeah, it was. I think, Antonio just got in too deep and kind of pushed out wide out. And there was a little bit of contact, obviously nothing, it was just all superficial. So just enough to scare everybody. So yeah, it's his to take. As long as he keeps the car clean. I did notice that when Panero came in, he had actually dropped off the back of Tabino by a couple of seconds. So I don't know if he had an issue somewhere and lost a little bit of time, but I think it was very smart for Panero to just come in and reset himself, take a quick breather, get the fuel on board, and get back out on the track and start setting some fast laps again.
Getting a crunch time here in this race, so we're going to see a whole lot of drivers try and shuffle for positions. You can see the graphic right now, and the highest driver to come into the pits is Marco Panero, who we're following right now, about to head his way through turn 12 and 13 here. I don't think any of the drivers right in front of him have come into the pits this time by. Actually, no, Pedro Carvalho has. So the Portuguese driver, who as things stand currently is the leader in S2, is now trundling his way down the pits. It's a very tricky pit lane, as we've mentioned all throughout this race, and also just trying to spot where you have to pull in is hard as well, as we see Christian Kabanka, who came into the pits earlier, now fighting hard. That's Jim Brewster right in front of him, and I believe that was Brad Cathcart that he just overtook. Cathcart was had some pretty bad damage earlier on in this race. I wonder, did he come into the pits early to fix that, or did he just hold on for the remainder of that stint? Either way, he's a lap down right now, which is not good for the Australian driver that's involved in that Masters Championship fight.
No, it's not a good day, and you're going to have those occasionally. So it's, you know, you have those, but yeah, he came in at lap 8. So he came in and got his car repaired, and took on the fuel. Looks like he's got took a just standard pit stop. So I don't think it was, so I think he feels like he's going to make it to the end, even stopping that early. So he stopped a lap after Mayer, and we were already talking about Mayer. Mayer's stop was incredibly quick, even now, after most of the field have pitted, with a 9:05 stop time. So not only is it an early stop for Mayer, it's also a very, very short one. So I'm not really sure Mayer is going to make it, but feel pretty good about you know, the driver we were just talking about, being able to make it, Cathcart, making it on fuel for the end of the race.
This man, Duda Castro, is definitely going to make it. We're approaching the final 8 minutes of this race, and he still hasn't come in. Neither has Tabino. Panero came in, I'm thinking now it was probably about 4 or 5 laps ago, but they have stayed out. Jason Green has come into the pits. We saw in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors earlier on this afternoon that Jason Green pulled off a masterful strategy and had a blisteringly quick stop to end up in P2 in that race. I wonder, are we going to see some strategy mastery from the driver of the 160 car? He was running in, I think, 5th or 4th when he came into the pits, if not a little bit farther back than that. But he was putting together a very solid drive, so we'll just have to wait and see how Green exits out. Exiting out in 9th, I believe, so very nicely played to still stay in the top 10. It's going to be close with himself and Brewster, I believe. He's going to be, actually, it's going to be Kabanka that closes up to him first. But you can see him exiting down through turn number 2 right now. Duda Castro and Joao Tabino have finally come into the pit. So right as I was being like, man, they've stayed out for quite a long time, they have now come in. Is this a response to Panero? Probably not. They just had to come into the pits. Alice Pleva in P3 has come in, along with Avenger Dantes and Resende. Resende actually getting by Dantes on pit entry there, so very aggressive it must have been for Resende to jump a spot heading down into the pits. Antonio Reyes, our leader in the Masters category, has come in as well. So we'll have to see how things shake out in the Masters category, along with the fight up at the front. Duda Castro out and away, Tabino out and away as well. So I think they're maintaining roughly the same gaps. Be very careful on pit exit here, guys. I think Duda Castro got away with that clean. I think all those drivers running up towards the front of the field got away with that fairly smooth. We'll just have to wait and see if they do pick up a penalty. I'll fact check myself to see if they did.
Yeah, it looked like everybody that we were watching came out clean. So yeah, Green is now, it's just very, very close there between Naselli and Race. As Naselli makes the move around to jump into P9, he's already taken his pit stop. He took it early. So now it's Race running in P10 and leading the Masters class. So yeah, it's just a nice 1.2 second gap between Castro and Tabino at the front, and they've pretty much checked out amongst the rest of the field. Panero a distant third, and then 6 seconds back from that is the rest of the field: Pleva, Dantas, Resende, Green, Kabanka, Naselli, and Race.
And Furster has lost out in that fight. This is Jurcevic who's leading in S2, and we'll just have to see how things shake up in the final 6 minutes. I'm not going to say he's on his way to a dominant win, because the last driver I said that to was Furster, who I just mentioned, running in P14 after the pit stops are done for a vast majority of these drivers. It's shaken out poorly. This is Jim Brewster around yet again, heading through the turn 6 and 7 section there. I wonder if there's a little bit of contact like there was earlier on. We're going to take a look at a replay to see what happened to Jim Brewster. Very close, making contact heading through that section, and you can see our buddy Josh Wilkie involved in that as well. Oh yeah, he did give him the bumper. Oh, yeah, that's not ideal. Not ideal at all.
Not ideal at all. Yeah, Brewster obviously on the inside of that battle there, kind of checked up a little bit early to give himself an option around the inside line. And Josh just not really quite expecting that, and gave him the fiberglass horn as Jim had just came out of the pits. He was, I think, the final car to actually pit during the course of the race.
I think we'll try and limit what we say about that incident with our buddy Josh Wilkie, because he's going to be our producer for the Radical Americas broadcast later on this evening. So we'll try and we'll keep it at a minimum for that, and we'll touch Yeah.
Yeah, at least on air. Off air, we'll give him all kind of grief about it. But for on air, yes, we'll keep it brief.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Cyberbullying only gets in trouble if you get caught and there's evidence of it. Hopefully that quote doesn't get taken out of context. Good lord. We'll touch on Evandro Dantas here in P number 5, trying to hold off Rosende, and Rosende was able to pull off that great move on Dantas coming into the pits. However, it didn't work out when it came time for them actually being down the pit lane. So Dantas has jumped ahead of him, running in P5. That is going to be close between those two in the later stages of this race, separated by barely any air. And they also have Wayne Buttermore right in front of them. That's checking up Dantas. So we'll see Rosende maybe go for a move here in the not too distant future. Side by side heading through the oval section. Different lines that these drivers are using, different strokes of drivers that we have here in this series. Rosende trying to get the move done on Buttermore heading through the oval section. There's Dantas runs nearly all the way out into that concrete barrier, and Rosende did not get hurt by that lap traffic nearly as bad as Dantas did. So if Rosende can keep it clean and try not to keep that sawing at the wheel action, try and keep that at a minimum heading through the 1 and 2 section that he spun at earlier on this afternoon. If Rosende can keep it clean, I think he has a very good shot at finishing in P5.
Yeah, absolutely. He is going to be a good. Oh, he's got to catch that though. Good catch by Rosende. Yeah, he did a good job on the oval. He ran the high line and came down off the banking to help the momentum of the car and help him make that move. And that was a great catch. So the car just wanted to rotate, and he managed to just give it some opposite lock. And as we see a battle for the lead here between Tabino and Castro.
Oh, here we go, side by side, coming on to the start-finish straightaway to begin lap 36. Tabino in the lead, Castro in second, and some lap traffic farther up the road. I think that may be Jim Brewster right in front of them. Yes, it is. That's Jim Brewster right in front. Hopefully, he'll try and get out of their way as quickly as we can. Hopefully, for Tabino's sakes, he's hoping to get out of the way. And for Castro's sakes, he wants Jim Brewster to hold up Tabino for as long as he can. Jim Brewster not really getting out of the way. They're heading through turn number 6 and 7, is checking up Tabino quite a lot. Will he go for a move heading into the hairpin? That is going to be big in this race. We don't have a whole lot of time left to go. Coming to go in terms of the laps and the minutes left in this race, and they're both gonna get by Brewster heading through that hairpin of turn number 11. Castro is going to have that almightily powerful slipstream coming down the start finish straightaway, but I don't think he's close enough to get the move done heading into turn number 1 and 2 this time by.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to this time by. I think he wants to next time by. I think he wants to wait for that last lap. I think he's just basically just gauging how much distance he needs in order to, or how close he's got to be in order to make that run on the last lap. So might have been a little bit of strategy there to let Tabino just jump out in front and lead here. At least that's my thoughts on it, because I think you're going to want to be in second on this final lap as we come up to it. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think this is going to be shaping up to be a really, really close finish.
You're joking about before the start of this broadcast and during it as well. We're going to see a photo finish. I have no doubt in my mind about that. Antonio Reese just got a nice move done on Nazelli to move into P at number 9 overall. Nazelli, usually we talk about him being an absolute hard charger starting this race farther towards the back and just cutting through the field with surgical precision. He actually set a qualifying time start in 15th, I believe, and is currently running in a solid P10. Antonio Reese, this man, is leading in the Masters category and has a huge gap between himself and Fisher, about 15 seconds separating them, and Antonio Reese actually getting caught out by traffic a little bit. There's our buddy Josh Wilkie, and right in front of him is Brad Cathcart. This is a bad race for him. Thankfully, these drivers do have some drop weeks at their disposal, so it's not going to hurt Brad Cathcart too much as we approach the final stages of the season. Rosende has now come into the pit, so that's a very strange call. Not sure why he's come down pit road. Is he serving some sort of penalty? I'll take a look to see if he has a black flag on him. No, he doesn't, so I think he's just coming in for a quick splash and dash at the end of this race, which is coming this time by. We are on the white flag. Joao Tabino is going to be leading them heading into the hairpin of turn number 11. However, Duda Castro is going to focus all his might and all his strength onto an exit coming out of this hairpin, going back onto that oval section. Duda Castro, that gap is going to diminish. It's about 0.7 of a second, which really isn't that close. We'll see if Duda Castro can close that gap. He is going to have that foot buried in the floor pan, but it's not going to be enough. Joao Tabino is going to take the checkered flag to win here at Phoenix. That's close behind with Castro. Only is actually, I'm not sure what in the world happened to Castro. I was expecting that gap to diminish, but it looked like that gap actually grew when they went on to the oval section. So a little bit surprising that we didn't see a photo finish that I was expecting between those two. There's a photo finish between Jason Green and Cabanca. Green ends up in P number 6, Cabanca in P8. Antonio Reese wins in the Masters category, and close behind Mayer, just in the last stages of this race, ends up ahead of Nazelli, and Jurcevic ends up atop of the S2 drivers. I think I know why the gap between Tabino and Castro was very close. I said that it was going to be a photo finish, and I think the iRacing gods wanted to prove me wrong. I think that's what happened there.
You think so? I think that they both short fueled, and I don't think Castro had enough fuel to make it to the end. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm looking at their stops. They were at least a second faster than everybody else on the track as far as their stoppage time. So they both kind of cut it as close as they could. I think maybe Castro cut it too close. Just didn't have enough fuel to battle on the last lap.
I mean, must be said, still an all right show for Duda Castro to end up in P number 2. Still only a second separating those two drivers. We make it seem like a second is a massive monumental gap here in these races. A second is closer than what you see from most racing series here. I think we're spoiled when it comes to these spec racer Fords, and we're off the back of a fantastic finish in the Other Ray Esports Racing League this past Tuesday. A race and a broadcast so entertaining that I blew at my voice at the very end of it, but I think all the cars have taken the checkered flag, so we may be able to get the results for you in just a couple of moments' time. From the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race at Phoenix, Joao Tabino, the Brazilian, ends up taking the checkered flag less than a second, separating himself and Duda Castro after 40 minutes of hard-pumping racing action. That's Marco Pinheiro with a quiet, it must be said, P3 result. Alice Pleva in P number 4. Avengro Dantas in P number 5. It would have been close between himself and the driver that he was locked steady in a nice fight all throughout it. However, it didn't really materialize, and Avengro Dantas ends up in 5th. Jason Green with a nice photo finish between himself and Christian Cabanca. Those two finish in P6 and P7 respectively. Antonio Reese in 8th, Simon Mayer in 9th, and Maurizio Nazelli will round out your top 10.
Yeah, Arnes Jurcevic takes Spec 2 class win, finishes 11th overall. Just behind him was Phil Berry in 12th, and looks like he's going to make inroads into that championship. Fritcher finishing 13th and P2 in the Masters. Rodriguez, Favini 14th and 15th. Pedro Carvalho in 16th. Megan Overstreet 17th. Josh Justice 18th. Tom Gradwell gets the final step on the Masters podium in 19th, and Paolo Brim rounds out the top 20.
And looking through, Jackson Resende ends up in P21. He was the one that was very close to finishing in the top 5 with himself and Avengro Dantas, sadly for him, and a very late pit stop relegates him to P21. Then Jim Brewster in 22nd, Ben Jacobs in 23rd, Kurt Nunez in 24th, Chris Montgomery in 25th, Paul Jackson, Josh Wilkie, Stevie Ray, Alan McCain, and Brad Cathcart will round out your top 30. Then we have Terizo there, P31, Wayne Buttermore in 32nd, Joseph Tarantino in 33rd, Badley in 34th, Jason Perry in 35th, Jason Greider in 36th, Russell Teckler in 37th, Greg Holland in 38th, Gianni Logan in 39th, Adam Bradshaw in 40th, Scott Russell in 41st, and Jorg Mani ends up 35 laps down in P42. I think he had a very early incident or some sort of disconnect that hurt him quite a lot. Not ideal for Jorg Mani. And those are the results here from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race at Phoenix. And I think we have some drivers waiting in the interview waiting area. We'll drag them in by the collar. Charles, who do you like to have a chat with?
Well, let's talk with our Masters class winner, Antonio Reis. We'll talk to him again today. Antonio, congratulations. Masters class win, P8 overall. What'd you think about the track?
Hello guys, good night again. Yeah, the track is a little bit slippery and it's kind of difficult to pass, but yeah, other than that, it's a nice track. It's very technical. I enjoy driving there with the guys. Yeah.
Yeah,
we have we start together, me and Simon, and then we just finish together as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, he stopped much earlier than you did, and you guys still found each other on the track. Yeah, just from our standpoint, obviously, it's not a track we really come to. It's one of the older scans, but there's a couple of tricky spots out there that caught a lot of people out today.
Yeah, you are, and you have to be careful with the brakes on those spots. Otherwise, the car really goes in a way that you don't want.
Well, I'll let
Yeah.
you give. I'll go ahead.
I was saying the asphalt, I think, looks different on this track. The way that it gets the tires degradation very quickly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, were the tires pretty worn down? Was there ever a thought that you might want to take tires during the race, or are they pretty good enough to last the 40 minutes?
Oh, I just don't know how to do it. I'm afraid to lose time with the tires. I don't know exactly the timings. That's why
Understood.
I keep the same.
I understand. Or go ahead and let you give your thanks and your shout outs, and we'll let you go for the night.
Yeah. I thank you for you guys for broadcasting as usual. It's very nice to have you, and also for Steve Ray and all the community, the Weekend Warriors community, all the drivers, and all the viewers watching. So thank you to anyone, all of them.
All right, Antonio,
I'm
congratulations.
very, very thankful. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
guys,
Have a good night.
good to have me. Thank you for having me. Yeah, good night.
That was Antonio Reese. Always nice to have a chat with a winner. I'm sure he is very happy with how things went for him this afternoon. One in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors, wins here in the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors. And now we enter the final trifecta of races from this season here with the Spec Racer Fords. We've gone to some strange tracks, this of course being one of them here at the Phoenix Road Course. But next time out, we're going to head to a bit more of a normal racing facility, that being Mid-Ohio. And Charles, what are your thoughts heading into that race, which is going to be a bit more typical than what we usually see?
Yes, that's such a good track for these cars. Both the Formula Fords and the Spec Racers, the racing is always really good there. Obviously, there's some very, very technical sections on Mid-Ohio's track. The last couple of corners coming off, the run from the start-finish line, very short start-finish straight. But then you get through turn one, which was also another tricky pit exit that we'll have to talk about. But down into the keyhole into turn two, and then down that second straight, when we really call it a back straight, but that takes you down into the really, really technical section. It's just a fun track, lots of high speeds, lots of elevation changes. And so it's just going to make for some really good racing. And these cars always put on a good show there. And so it's going to be fun. I'll be looking forward to it.
Spec Racer Fords are always fantastic to watch, whether it be here with the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors or with the Ray Esports Racing League every single Tuesday night. They're going to be entering their final trifecta of races as well, Laguna Seca, at 9 a.m. Eastern time. I'm not sure how that works out for the rest of the U.S., and people in Europe will probably be sound asleep by the time that broadcast starts, but that series is always fantastic. And man, I think the final few races that we have here for both the Ray Esports season and the Weekend Warriors side of things, it's really exciting. We're going to be in for some absolute shows when it comes to the championship fights and the fights out there on track. So if you want to stay up to date of everything going on here at Apex Racing TV, remember to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a single thing here on Apex Racing TV. So I think for this broadcast for this week for the Weekend Warriors, that will just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and Samuli Kuma doing a great job working the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so much for watching. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you all again in 1 week's time.